This conference will now be recorded.
So, divergent squint is also called as exotropia. Okay, what is exophoria and what is exotropia? What is phoria and what is tropia? You already had squint classes, so you should know what is exophoria and exotropia. Can anyone tell me? Or should I ask the number? Number 40? Number 40? Absent or present? Roll number 40. Roll number 20. Roll number 20. Okay. So what is phoria and what is tropia? Phoria is nothing but a squint which we can't see. It is present. Okay. So it is like latent. It doesn't manifest. It is latent. It means it is hiding. Okay. Phoria is a squint which is hiding. Whereas tropia is a squint which is visible to us. Okay. So this is called manifest squint. Phoria is a latent squint which is hiding, and tropia means manifest squint. Okay. So this squint or strabismus is again divided into two types: concomitant squint and concomitant squint. Okay. So concomitant squint is a type of squint in which the deviation is same in all gazes. Okay. There is a primary gaze, there is a levo version, there is a dextro version. Okay. So whatever the gaze is, the deviation is same in concomitant squint. Okay. Whereas in concomitant squint, the degree of deviation varies in the different gazes. Okay. So in concomitant, degree of deviation is same in all gazes, whereas in concomitant, degree of deviation changes in different gazes. Okay. So we are describing today about mainly about concomitant squint. Okay. So this concomitant squint is again divided into divergent squint, which is called exotropia, and convergent squint, which is called esotropia. Okay. So exotropia is nothing but outward deviation of one eye while the other eye fixates. Okay. So one eye is fixating, but the other eye is deviating out. Okay. Or the other eye is abducted. Okay. So this is called exotropia. Okay. This exotropia is classified into congenital exotropia, primary exotropia, sensory deprivation causing exotropia, and consecutive exotropia. So what is congenital exotropia? It is almost rare and present at birth. Okay, it is congenital, right? So it is present at birth. It is characterized by fairly large angle of deviation. Okay, so angle of deviation is fairly large, so that we can see on inspection. Okay, when a child comes and when we see the child, we will see that the child is having a deviation. Okay, so there is fairly large angle of squint or strabismus, nearly 35 prism diopters. It is alternate, the exodeviation is alternate with homonymous fixation in lateral gaze. And in many cases, there is no amblyopia. And then coming to primary exotropia. This primary exotropia can be unilateral or alternating, and it is usually of two types. It is either intermittent or constant. What is intermittent? Intermittent means the child will not be having the exotropia permanently. Okay, at some times or due to any aggravating factors, the child will manifest exotropia for a short time, and then the eyes will be normal again. Okay, so this is intermittent. Intermittent means it is coming and it is going. Okay, it is not remaining there. It is coming and it is going. Okay, so most common type of exodeviation. Intermittent exotropia is the most common type of exodeviation, and the age of onset is usually between 2 to 5 years. This exotropia becomes manifest at times and latent at others. Okay, so manifest means we can see, and latent means it is hiding. Okay, so at sometimes we can see it, and at sometimes it is hiding. Sometimes hiding. Okay, so it is called intermittent. It is sometimes we can see it, sometimes we cannot see it. Okay, so it is intermittent exotropia. So what are the precipitating factors leading this manifestation of the intermittent exotropia? They are bright light, fatigue, ill health, and daydreaming. Okay, sensory testing usually reveals good fusion, stereopsis, and no amblyopia. This is only intermittent, right? So when the child is having the intermittent diplopia, sorry, I mean intermittent exotropia, the child will be having fusion problems. But when this intermittent exotropia subsides, then the child will be having a normal gaze, and that's why the fusion and stereopsis will be normal, and there will be no amblyopia. So coming to constant exotropia, if not treated in time, the intermittent exotropia may decompensate to become constant exotropia. Okay, so this intermittent exotropia, if we are not able to identify it and we cannot treat it, then it will become into constant exotropia. Means the child will have constant exotropia which is manifesting. Okay, it is not hiding further. We can see it clearly. It has been manifested. Okay, so primary exotropia may be of following three types. One is convergence insufficiency type. Okay, so convergence is mainly in near, right? So we converge the eyes mainly for the near vision or reading. So in convergence insufficiency type, the exotropia is more at near. Okay, so convergence is insufficient. Insufficient means the eyes will diverge. Okay, convergence is insufficient, so eyes will diverge, and this is more, this divergence is more in near than the distance. Okay, so convergence insufficiency type of exotropia is more in near vision than in distance vision. Okay, then divergence excess type. Divergence excess means usually we diverge the eyes when we see at the distance, right? So when we are seeing at the distance, the eyes will diverge more than required. Okay, so this is the vision while we see in the distance. But when the divergence is excess, the gaze will be like this. Okay, this is more in distance. Okay, so divergence excess type exotropia is more in distance than near. Then is a basic non-specific type. In this type of exotropia, the deviation is same for near and distance. Okay, so in convergence insufficiency, the deviation is more in near. In divergence excess, the deviation is more in distance, and in basic non-specific type, the deviation is same for near and distance vision. So coming to sensory exotropia, also called as sensory deprivation exotropia, because this exotropia is caused due to loss of sensory stimulus to the retina. Okay, this is a constant unilateral deviation. It results from long-standing monoocular lesions. It occurs in adults and is associated with low vision in affected eye. So what are the causes which can lead to sensory deprivation? They are traumatic cataract. In traumatic cataract, the lens is usually opacified. So the vision, the retina will not be obtaining any light. Okay. Then corneal opacity. Here the cornea becomes opaque. Optic atrophy. The disc dies. Anisometropic amblyopia. Here there is a large amount of refractive error. Then retinal detachment and organic macular lesions. Okay, so these are the causes. They lead to the loss of sensory stimulus to the retina. Okay, so due to loss of sensory stimulus to the retina, the eyes goes into exotropia. And the other one is consecutive exotropia. Consecutive is nothing but coming after something. Consecutive meaning is coming after something, right? So it is a constant unilateral exotropia which results either due to surgical overcorrection of esotropia. Okay, if a child or any individual comes to us with esotropia, we will usually correct it, right? So if we will usually overcorrect it with a small degree. Okay, if this overcorrection is more than the degree which is needed, then the eye will go into exotropia. Okay, overcorrection of esotropia can go into exotropia. Okay, so exotropia. Okay, so this type of exotropia is called consecutive exotropia. Okay, or there can be a spontaneous conversion of small degree of esotropia with amblyopia into exotropia. Okay, a small degree of esotropia, if it is spontaneous associated with amblyopia, change into exotropia. So to diagnose the exotropia, the main thing we all should know is history. Okay, the history should include age of onset. Okay, so when did the exotropia you start? Okay, age of onset, when did the exotropia started? Then duration, from how many years or months the patient is having exotropia. Then mode of onset, is it sudden or it is gradual? Any illness which has caused the exotropia. Was there any fever, trauma, or any infections before the formation of a squint in a eye? Okay, is it intermittent or constant? It is unilateral or alternating? Is any family members having any history of squint? And if there is a history of any head tilt or turn, and so on. Okay, so we should ask the patient about this. We should ask about age of onset, duration, mode of onset, any illness preceding the deviation, intermittent or constant. The deviation is either intermittent or the deviation is constant. The deviation is unilateral or alternating, and there is family, if there is any family history of squint or history of any head tilt or turn. So coming to examination, first we do is inspection. Okay, so usually in inspection, if the squint is manifest and it is in a of a large angle, it is usually seen. Okay, we need not require to do any test. We will usually see a large squint, either it is convergent or divergent on inspection. Okay, then we will check for ocular movements. Both uniocular as well as binocular movements should be tested in all the cardinal positions of gaze. Okay, there are 6 cardinal positions of gaze, right? So we should check this uniocular and binocular movements. What are uniocular movements called as? Uniocular movements are called as ductions, whereas binocular movements are divided into versions and vergences, right? Versions is levo, dextro, dextro elevation. These are all the versions. And vergences are convergence and divergence. Okay, these two are the versions. Versions and vergence. So then we should check the pupillary reactions. This may be abnormal in patients with secondary deviations due to diseases of retina and optic nerve. Okay, so if the patient is having sensory deprivation exotropia, usually the cause can be in retina or optic nerve. And with if the retina or optic nerve is damaged, usually the pupillary reactions will be altered. Okay. Then media and fundus examination. This will also help us to know if there is any opacity in the media or if there is any abnormality in the fundus. usually the diseases of retina or optic nerve. Okay. Then testing of vision and refractive error. This is very important because a refractive error may be responsible for the symptoms of patient or for the deviation itself. Preferably, refraction should be performed under full cyclopegia, especially in children, because the children usually have more tone of the muscle. Okay, so they will try to accommodate more to see the chart. Such a way we can have a difficulty in reading their correct refractive error. Okay, so when we do cyclopegia, the muscle tone will be relaxing. And we can get a good idea of the correct refractive error of the child. So then coming to the test, the first one is cover test. Okay, this cover test can be direct cover test or alternate cover test. Okay, so this direct cover test, it confirms the presence of a manifest squint. To perform it, the patient is asked to fixate on a point light. Okay, the patient is first asked to fixate on a point light. This point light can be fixed either in near or in distance. Okay, we can check for both near deviation and we can check for distance deviation. Okay, so we will check for near and distance both. Okay, then the normal looking eye is covered while observing the movement of uncovered eye. Okay, one eye is normal, so it is covered. Okay, when this eye is covered, usually the fusion will be broken. Okay, when both eyes sees one object, the fusion will be there. When the one eye is covered, the fusion will usually be broken. Okay, if the patient is having any latent squint, then it can become manifest. Okay, usually the latent squint is latent, means it is hiding because of fusion. Because of the power of fusion of the eyes, the latent squint is hiding. But when we cover the one eye or we are breaking the fusion, when we are breaking the fusion, the eye will attain its normal position. Okay, if it is normal, it is will be straight. If it is if it is exotropic, it will go out, and if it is esotropic, it will come in. Okay, so this is the main use of cover test. In the presence of squint, the uncovered eye will move in opposite direction to take fixation, while in apparent squint, there will be no movement. Okay, this test should be performed for near fixation, that is at 33 centimeters, as well as distance fixation, that is 6 meters. Then comes alternate cover test. It reveals whether the squint is unilateral or alternate. Okay, if the squint is only unilateral, that means we are having squint only in one eye. Okay, let us assume that right eye is normal and left eye is having a squint. Okay, so when we do cover test in this eye, normally both eyes will be fused, right? So then cover the fusion will be broken and this eye will go exotropic. Okay, and when we remove the cover, there will be fusion again and the eye will remain gain its fusion position. Okay, when we cover this, the fusion will be broken. The fusion will be broken. This eye will be normal because this is not having any exotropia. The fusion will be broken and the eye under the cover. Okay, this is exotropic, right? So it will go out. Okay, this is exotropic eye. It will go out. So there is only one eye. This eye is having exotropia. Means it is unilateral exotropia. Okay. What we do in alternate cover test is we will cover one eye for a long time and then we will suddenly change the cover between the two eyes. Okay, so when we do this alternate covering, we will see if other eye is also having a squint. Okay, this eye is having exotropia. We will see in alternate cover test whether this eye is having exotropia or not. Okay, when we are covering this eye, this eye will go into exotropia, and when we are covering this eye will go into exotropia. If the squint is alternate, okay, if the squint is alternate, when we cover this eye will go into exotropia, and when we cover this eye will go into exotropia. If the squint is alternate, but if the squint is unilateral, then when we close this eye will go into exotropia, but when we close this eye will be in primary position. It will not go into exotropia. Okay, so this can be unilateral exotropia can be known by cover test, whereas alternate exotropia can be known by alternate cover test. Okay, so here the eyes are usually maintained in a normal position by the fusion. Okay, so when we are covering this eye, the fusion will be broken. Okay, the fusion will be broken and the eye will deviate. Okay, this eye can deviate or this eye can deviate, whichever eye is affected. If this eye is affected, then this eye will go into, if the eye normal position is esotropia, the eye will go into esotropia. Here it is showing esotropia. Okay, and if the eye's normal position is exotropia, then this eye will go into exotropia. Okay, so this is cover test. Coming to estimation of angle of deviation, there are many tests which can help to estimate the angle of deviation. Why is the estimation of angle of deviation important? Because according to this angle of deviation, we will do the surgery on the muscle. Okay, so whatever the deviation is, we will recess or resect the muscle to the same amount. Okay, so Hirschberg corneal reflex test. Here it is a rough and but handy method to estimate the angle of manifest squint. In it, the patient is asked to fixate at point light held at a distance of 33 centimeters, and the deviation of the corneal light reflex from the center of pupil is noted in the squinting eye. Usually, 1 mm of deviation is equal to 7 degrees of deviation, and 1 degree of deviation is equal to 2 prism diopters. So 1 mm of deviation is nearly 14 prism diopters. Okay. So here, usually if the eye is in normal gaze, this is the pupil reflex. Okay, it falls usually in the center. Okay, this is the center. Okay, and if it falls near the pupillary border, this is the pupil, right? If it falls near the pupillary border, then the deviation is 15 degrees. Okay, if it falls at the pupillary border, then the deviation is 15 degrees. If the deviation is if the reflex falls between the pupillary border and the limbus, then it is nearly 30 degrees. Okay, and if the light falls at the limbus or beyond the limbus, it is 45 degrees or greater than 45 degrees. Okay, at the limbus is 45 degrees and beyond the limbus is greater than 45 degrees. Okay, so at the pupillary border 15 degrees, between pupil and limbus 30 degrees, and at the limbus 45 degrees. Okay, the prism and cover test, also called as the prism bar cover test. Okay, here prisms of increasing strength with the apex towards the deviation. Okay, the apex of the prism should always be towards the deviation. Okay, so in esotropia the apex will be inside, because the eye will be inside. In esotropia the apex will be inside. Okay, in exotropia the apex will be outside, eye will be outside, right? So apex will be outside. Okay, it is placed in front of the one eye, and the patient is asked to fixate an object with the other. The cover uncover test is performed till there is no recovery movement of the eye under cover. This will tell the amount of deviation in prism diopters. Both heterophoria as well as heterotopia can be measured by this test. Okay, so usually what we do is, we will take a prism. Okay, the eye is having esotropia here, sorry, I mean exotropia here. Okay, So when the eye is having exotropia, we will keep the base towards the deviation. Sorry, keep the apex towards the deviation. This is the apex of the prism and this is the base of the prism. Okay. So we will keep the apex towards the deviation. When we keep the apex towards the deviation, the eye will be moving to opposite side. Okay, the eye will move opposite to the apex. Okay, wherever we keep the apex, the eye will move opposite to the apex. Okay, so after the eye moves opposite to the apex, we will perform cover uncover test. Okay, we will close this eye and then close this eye. Okay, if the prism has nullified the exotropia or esotropia, the eye will not move. Even if we do cover uncover test, the eye will not move. Okay, so the power at which the prism diopter, the prism will be having different powers. Okay, the prism will be having 5 prism diopters, then 10 prism diopters, then 20 prism diopters. Okay, we in first place 5 prism diopters, and we will do cover uncover test. If the eye is moving, then we will again change it to 10 prism diopters, then we will again cover it, and then we will increase it 15, 20, likewise. Okay, so at a power, the eye will be not moving. Even if we do cover uncover test, the eye will not be moving at some power. Okay, let's say the eye is not moving at 20 prism diopters. Okay, so the angle of deviation is 20 prism diopters in that eye. Okay, this is the way by which we can do prism bar cover test, and we will get deviation of angle in prism diopters. Okay, then this is a Krimsky corneal reflex test. It is same, but here what is different from the prism bar test is, instead of the cover uncover test and movement of eye, we will use corneal light reflex here. Okay, so we will add the prisms, 5 prism diopters, 10 prism diopters, and 15 prism diopters likewise, and we will see the corneal light reflex, whether it has been centered or not. Okay, if there is exotropia, usually the reflex will fall on the limbus of a nasal sac. Okay, the eye is like this. So when we show the light, it will be falling on the limbus. Okay, so when we add the prisms, the eye will come into primary position and the reflex will fall on the cornea, center of the cornea or center of the pupil. Okay, then that prism diopter with which the center of the pupil is having the light reflex, it will be the power of the deviation. Okay, say at 25 prism diopters we are having central reflex, then the deviation will be 25 prism diopters. Okay, then we can also measure the binocular single vision. There are many methods to measure the binocular single vision. It can either be measured by synoptophore. It can also be measured by Worth 4 dot test, which I have already taught in the last class. Worth 4 dot test, and also Worth 4 dot test after image test. Worth 4 dot test after image test. This test can also be used to know binocular single vision. Okay, so this synoptophore can measure all types of heterophoria and heterotropia, and they can be measured accurately with the synoptophore. So coming to treatment of concomitant strabismus, goals of treatment are to achieve good cosmetic correction, to improve visual acuity, and to maintain binocular single vision. However, many times it is not possible to achieve all the goals in every case. So treatment modalities are spectacle correction. The spectacle correction should always be given after full correction of refractive error after the cycloplegia. Okay, we will give cycloplegic, then we will do refractive correction. Okay, so this is the correct amount of refractive correction we should be given. It will improve the visual acuity and at times may correct the squint partially or completely. Then the second one is occlusion therapy. It is indicated in the presence of amblyopia. After correcting the refractive error, the normal eye is occluded and the patient is advised to use the squinting eye. Occlusion helps to improve the vision in children below the age of 10 years. Uh, Everyone knows the concept of amblyopia, right? So amblyopia eye means it is a lazy eye. Okay, the eye is not seeing. It has the capacity to see, but it is not seeing. It is not doing its work because it has been deviated. Okay, this eye is straight. This is eye is doing its work. Okay, and but this eye is deviated and it does not want to do its work. Okay, it does not want to fuse itself and do its work. It is deviating and it is becoming lazy. Okay, so this is the amblyopic eye. So we will do occlusion. Occlusion means we are closing. Okay, this eye is a good eye, so we are closing this eye. Okay, what will happen with this? The patient will be uh, he must be seeing with this eye. Okay, when we close this eye, the patient must be seeing with this eye. So this eye will lose its laziness and it will try to see. Okay, when the eye tries to see, the vision in it improves. Okay, so where there is amblyopia, the occlusion is very important. But what is another important thing? The correct refractive correction. Okay, if in this eye we should give correct refractive correction. Okay, if we don't give correct refractive correction, the patient will be, this eye will be occluded. Okay, the patient will be having only this eye to see, and if the refractive error is not correct, the patient will not be able to see. Okay, we are trying to make this eye to see, but if the correct refractive error is not correct, the patient cannot see with this eye. Okay, so he will be not seeing with any eye. Okay, we should not do that. We should give correct refractive correction in the amblyopic eye. Then we should stimulate it to see the surroundings by occluding this eye. Okay. Then the last resort is squint surgery. It is required in most of the cases to correct the deviation. However, it should always be instituted after the correction of refractive error, treatment of amblyopia, and orthoptic exercises. So there are some basic principles for the squint surgery. These are to weaken the strong muscle by recession, that is shifting the insertion posteriorly, or to strengthen a weak muscle by resection, that is shortening the muscle. And coming to type and amount of muscle surgery, it depends upon the type and angle of squint, age of patient, duration of the squint, and the visual status. Therefore, degree of connection versus amount of extraocular muscle manipulated required cannot be mathematically determined. But there is a estimation that 1 mm resection of medial rectus can correct 1 degree to 1.5 degree of deviation. Okay, so if there is a if we had performed a prism diopter test, okay, we got a 20 prism diopters deviation. Okay, so 20 prism diopters deviation means 10 degrees of deviation. Okay, 1 degree of deviation is equal to 2 prism diopters. Okay, so 10 degree of deviation means 20 prism diopters. 20 degree of deviation means 40 prism diopters. Okay, so when we did a prism bar test, we got 20 degrees of prism diopters, means there is 10 degrees of deviation. Okay, if there is a 10 degrees of deviation, then we can choose around 8 mm of the medial rectus muscle to resect. Okay, and then for recession, 1 mm of recession will give 2 degrees to 2.5 degrees. Okay, resection is to strengthen the muscle. Resection is to strengthen the muscle. Recession is weakening the muscle. Okay, resection means strengthening the muscle and recession means weakening the muscle. Don't get confused. Okay, and coming to this in lateral rectus, 1 mm of resection and recession of lateral rectus is usually done to 1 to 2 degrees of deviation. Okay, so the maximum limit allowed for MR resection is 8 mm. Okay, then MR recession is 5.5 mm, LR resection is 10 mm, and LR recession is 8 mm. Okay, but we may get doubt if there is more deviation and we are having only 8 mm of MR resection. Okay, if we do 8 mm of MR resection, we will get usually around 10 to 12 degrees of deviation corrected. Okay, what will we do if we have 15 degrees of deviation? Then we will do MR resection along with the LR recession. Okay, we are strengthening the muscle and weakening the other muscle. Okay, MR and LR are antagonist muscles. Okay, so when we weaken the LR, the MR will get extra strength. Okay, we are already strengthening it, and while we are weakening the LR, we are giving the MR extra strength. Okay, so by this way we can correct the extra deviation. Okay, by doing surgery on two muscles, resecting one muscle and recessing one muscle. Okay, so what are the steps of recession? Usually, muscle is exposed by reflecting a flap of overlying conjunctiva and Tenon's capsule. Okay, the muscle will be covered with the Tenons and conjunctiva, right? So we will just reflect the flap of Tenons and conjunctiva, and we will expose the muscle. Okay, then two Weichel sutures are passed through the outer quarters of the muscle tendon near the insertion. Okay, there is a, we can see the insertion of muscle, right? So we will just pass two Weichel sutures at the insertion of muscle. Then we will disinsert the muscle. We will cut the insertion and disinsert the muscle from the sclera. It is usually done with tenotomy scissors. Okay. Then the amount of recession is measured with the calipers and marked on the sclera. Okay. We will usually get the amount of deviation in degrees or prism diopters. Okay. So for one, we will measure how much mm of the recession we will require to correct that degree of deviation, and then we will mark it with the calipers. Okay, this is the insertion of the muscle where from which we have disinserted it. This is the one edge of calipers and this is the other edge of the calipers. Okay, we will keep it there and we will decide the muscle will be again sutured at this point. Okay, rather than this point, the muscle is sutured at this point. Okay, so by doing this, the muscle has been inserted posterior to its normal insertion, right? It is inserted here, so the muscle has been weakened. Okay, the muscle has been weakened. Then muscle is exposed. These are the steps of resection. The muscle is exposed similarly by lifting the flap of the conjunctiva and tenons. Then the amount to be resected is measured with the calipers and marked. This mark is done on the muscle itself. Okay, for the recession we has done the mark on the sclera. Okay, but here for the resection the mark is done on the muscle itself. This is the muscle. Okay, this is the muscle. We will mark the muscle here. This is the insertion of the muscle. We will mark the amount of resection here. Okay, and then the sutures are passed here, not at the insertion. In recession we has passed at the insertion, right? The sutures are passed at the insertion of the muscle and then it is been disinserted. Okay, but here the sutures are passed after deciding the amount of resection. This is the amount of resection. The sutures are passed here. Okay, the sutures are passed here. Then the muscle is disinserted. This part which is extra, this part is extra, right? This part is removed. Okay, this part is removed, and here there are the sutures here, right? So these sutures will be brought and they are inserted here at the place of its normal insertion. Okay, so we are strengthening the muscle. We are pulling the muscle to become tight. Okay, when the muscle becomes tight, the strength will increase. Okay, the pull will increase. So this is the concept of resection. Resection is to strengthen the muscle and recession is to weaken the muscle. Okay. So here, this is recession. Okay. The muscle is usually inserted here. Okay. The normal insertion is here. We will disinsert the muscle and we will insert it posteriorly. Okay. The muscle is moved posteriorly. This is recession for weakening of the muscle. Okay. So here in resection, this part of the muscle is removed and this part is sutured here at its normal insertion. Okay. This, by this, the muscle becomes shortened and the shortened muscle have increased strength. Okay. So this is how we do recession and resection, and the amount of resection for and recession is decided by the degrees of deviation. Okay. Thank you. Any doubts? Any doubts? Okay, so this is the divergent squint, also
No.
called as exotropia. Okay, so exotropia is usually of 4 types: congenital, primary, secondary or sensory deprivation, and consecutive. This examination and history are very important. Mainly the cover uncover test, alternate cover test, then corneal reflex test, Hirschberg corneal reflex test, prism bar test, and Krimsky test. Okay, so these are all the tests which will help in the diagnosis and management of concomitant divergent squint. Okay, in concomitant divergent squint, the deviation and other things are measured. There are many other tests to measure the deviation in concomitant squint, but in concomitant squint, these are the main tests which are done, and these are the main tests which will help you to know the degree of deviation and then manage the degree of deviation. Okay. Okay, you can leave the meeting.